Welcome to Part 2 of America's Freedom Seminar.
Speaking before the Massachusetts legislature in 1788, Samuel Langdon said, "On the people, therefore, of these United States, it depends whether wise men or fools, good or bad men, shall govern." Yes, today we see who is responsible for our present state of affairs: the voters. Let not men openly irreligious or immoral become your legislators. So why is it that at the present time various public officials are in trouble with law enforcement or are even in prison? Who allowed these people to get into positions of power anyway?
Hey, don't point the finger at me. It's always the other guy's fault.
What about electing Marxists and socialists to government offices in the United States? We have some socialists in positions of great power at this very moment, if you didn't know. Let's go to the source of Marxist socialism and quote Marx himself.
Abolition of the family.
That's the first step to destroy civilization. He said this to the woman he wanted to marry.
Jenny, if we can but weld our souls together, then with contempt shall I fling my glove in the world's face. Then shall I stride through the wreckage a creator.
You see, it's all about him and his anger, his hate. He never did have a regular job, a profession, a public office of trust, and as a result, he never could feed his family. He thought men married women only to have children, to be as servants, a totally selfish attitude. Marx was unemployed when Jenny finally agreed to marry him, and Marx stayed unemployed for the rest of their married life. Why should this delusional, selfish man be trusted to provide answers to the world's troubles? Remember, this is the father of forced revolutionary socialism, called communism. He even thought that enforcing his philosophy with guns would do away with war. But such force engenders hate, which causes just the opposite, more war. Communist dictators have always fomented revolutions. They're experts, but they don't know how to create peace. The eventual no more need for government promise of the socialists and their claim of imbuing in man an inherited trait of eternal peace has never happened in history. Marx's philosophy always starts a war because it divides mankind with hate, causing misery and death wherever it rules. Marx didn't even know the source of peace, that in reality his only peace was death from the barrel of a gun. Note Marx's language as it does some fancy footwork. What is he talking about? Oh, you're the product of your environment. We'll fix that. I'll change the environment, and then you'll be good boys and girls, and finally all government will melt away, and nobody will fight, and this will be like heaven. It sounds good on the surface, but it isn't good below the surface. Many have fallen for this irrational philosophy because they dream of peace and prosperity without the principles of God instituted to create peace and prosperity. And one of the biggest principles is personal responsibility. But the greedy and lazy gravitate to Marx's freebie philosophy in droves. Yes, the government will take care of us, so we're for communism. Marx rants on.
The theory of the communists may be summed up in a single sentence. Abolition of private property.
So how far can he go with that? How about the private property of your own body? Yes, he'll take possession of that too. Here we have a proposition to take away your freedom almost completely. Private property is the only way the individual can grow his own freedom. Property is an extension of his mind, his body, and his will, just as much as arms and legs are extensions of his mind. Don't blame private property for injustice, but blame the real culprit, selfish men who misuse their property. Property is innocent by itself. Communism misuses all property it steals on a vast scale because by its nature, communism discourages incentive, even the reason to continue living, except for the privileged few who possess the power of the government to enforce their godless decrees. What incentive would you have if you received little or no benefit in return? Well, in spite of guarantees, the communists have never been able to keep their promises. That's why communism destroys your incentive, even your hope to grow more happiness. That's why Russia has become a nation of alcoholics. This is a most amazing assertion from Marx, that property is alleged to be the foundation of all personal freedom. He was blind to the fact that private property is the core of wealth production. Somehow this brilliant man was blind to the simple facts of life, that private property is an extension of our freedom and the means by which we make economic progress as a nation. Then he claims that capitalism, the idea of saving your money and using it to build successful businesses that improve the world, self-destructs because it is evil. As a matter of fact, it was capitalists who subsidized and saved the USSR in the 1930s, 40s, and beyond. Does that tell you something? Even though Marx's system is so bad and such a failure, certain powerful but foolish Americans still saved the USSR over a period of many years by pouring in foreign aid to prop it up. But the Russians weren't satisfied with these free gifts and planted spies in various American industries to steal our secrets, to get undeserved advantages over us. This war has been going on for many decades. And don't be fooled by false reports claiming that we're able to connect and cooperate with communists. No, that is a sham. Their old battle plan to put us down continues to be active as ever, even as we speak. Max Eastman was an American writer who was fooled by the communist dream when it overtook Russia in the early 1900s. He did all he could to build up the new Russia and wrote 6 books supporting the communist cause. However, when he visited the Soviet Union, he was shocked and didn't want to admit the obvious economic disaster that greeted him. Instead, he excused it, thinking the revolution merely needed more time. Well, after 20 years of believing the socialist lie, he finally faced the fact that he'd been terribly wrong. He wrote a book about it called Reflections on the Failure of Socialism in 1962. Remember, communism is a form of socialism, the form that wants immediate change by revolution rather than going the long way of subverting a nation's laws over a period of many years. Listen to what Mr. Eastman had to say about Marx's understanding of human nature.
Why did the rationalizations of Marx and dynamic by the engineering genius of Lenin turn into a nightmare? These men had a naive and romantic conception of what a man is. We thought of nature as our ally, if not indeed our model. We were dead wrong. The basic error in the whole century-long blunder has been a crude and foolish conception, or no conception, of human nature.
In other words, these revolutionaries didn't know what they were talking about. They enslaved and murdered millions of people, essentially for nothing. In the next lesson, we'll see if you pass the test.